Did you see the pictures here? My wedding picture? This is Mark's father, mother. And this is Mark, Fulton, and Alice. That's our wedding picture.
Who's that young lady? This is the funeral. This is you putting flowers on the grave.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, year by year by year. It was 1954 to 1955. And then we said we'd stay till 19... I think that sometimes it's not easy to follow the will of God for your life. My wishes were not to be a missionary at all, because I had seen the problems that my parents had suffered. I was born in Tokyo, Japan, of missionary parents, and we had very little food sometimes. I look back on my life, and it did not seem a pleasant one. You know, in your teenage, you think differently, and I thought, no, missionary life was wonderful for my parents, and I enjoyed growing up there, and I loved Japan. I was better in business in school, then went to commercial business college. When I met Mark, he looked like that. He came and held evangelistic meeting, a youth crusade in my dad's church in Vancouver, Canada. I told my dad, please don't let him stay in our house in those days. And I got tired of the girls teasing us that my dad would have young evangelists to marry his two daughters. About a week or so after he was there, what happened was he took me for lunch one day. And from there, yeah. But I didn't want to marry a preacher. I really didn't. But I guess God changed my mind. When he mentioned being an evangelist and traveling from church to church, I was more intrigued with that, and I was very fond of him, of course. So I traveled with Mark quite a bit, holding a week's meetings or 2 weeks meetings. Usually it was youth crusades to help young people, you know, to find the will of God for their lives. We wanted a child, so we were delighted when I became pregnant with Bonnie, and she was born in August 1953. Then one day, we got a letter from the Foreign Missions Department asking us if we would go to India for 1 year. I was very doubtful that it was God's plan for our lives. And I could not see that God would want us to travel through India, holding meetings and crusades with a small baby. I mean, we weren't professionals. Mark was a good speaker, but would that be enough to bring crowds in? But Mark's father was so adamant that when God opened the door, you should walk in it. When we boarded that ship and we stood on deck and saw the Statue of Liberty go by, I had tears in my eyes because I did not have any idea what the future would hold for us. Give me the first paragraph again, please, Sue.
Dear Bob, thank you so much for your kind email regarding yesterday being the 65th anniversary of Mark, Bonnie, 1-year-old, and myself boarding the boat in New York to leave for India.
Yeah. And the next one?
We were scheduled to go on the Mauritania to Southampton in England and then take a freighter to Calcutta. However, the freighter was canceled. After 2 weeks, we were able to schedule passage on a Dutch ship to Colombo, Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. Therefore, it took us 2 months and 3 ships to get to Calcutta for scheduled evangelistic meetings in India for 1 year. Our instructions by the missions department were to first hold tent meetings and help Dan and Esther construct a church.
Okay, I need to add something there. Little did we know they would suddenly decide to leave, and that God had other plans for our life.
When Pastor and Mrs. Buntain came, it's a very interesting time in India's history because 1947 is when India became independent. For most of the older mission agencies that were present, India's becoming independent was more or less a signal that it's time you wound up and left. Pastor and Mrs. Buntain's coming to India was in the opposite direction.
It was 18 years ago that Pastor Mark Buntain came to Calcutta with his family.
You know, a beggar walked into our tent meetings and he screamed out in the middle of Mark's message, "Preacher, feed our bellies and then start to tell us that a God in heaven loves us." And that spoke volumes to our hearts. And Mark said, unless we get down to ground level, we will not win anybody.
Because Calcutta is only 4 hours away from East Pakistan, Bangladesh border, there was a deluge of refugees, which created this major social and economic crisis. People living on the streets, dying of hunger, children running on the streets with nowhere to go, no place to live. And that shaped your granddad and grandmom's response.
You cannot reach people lying on the street and tell them God loves them. They would say, nobody loves us, so wouldn't be here. In order to show them the love of Christ, you have to do something about it.
The Buntains are dedicated to helping the whole person. Huldah says, you don't really help a nation until you've taught her children to read and write.
I think what needs to be appreciated is that they started a school system which has churned out many students, many alumni who are doing very well in life today. The healthcare system which was started by them, which includes a hospital, community centers in Calcutta, clinics across the state of West Bengal, and a vibrant outpatient department.
It was like Topsy. It grew with us. We first started the school, and then the school grew, and then the hospital grew. And so you kind of grew with it. It was quite an exciting time. Then when we got Maureen, it helped us. Mark got very fond of her. She was with us, I think, from about the age of 7. The school was completed, and the hospital was completed, but we were still waiting for the church permit. And the church permit finally came, and Mark, on Friday, signed for the building to commence and died on Sunday.
In this year,
Dieses Jahr
habe ich gesagt, more than once,
mehr als einmal.
my time is running out.
Well, you know, I didn't have the faith of Mark. Mark had tremendous faith. I don't have that. I don't have that.
I know there were difficulties,
Und ich weiß, dass es Schwierigkeiten
but
gab.
with God, they are not impossibilities.
We say God makes no mistakes. But sometimes we kind of have to think he may have made a mistake. So, you know, when Mark died so suddenly, and I was sitting in that airport in Bangkok to go back to Calcutta, I was sitting there thinking, now what? And I heard a voice distinctly, take it one day at a time and I'll help you. And I thought I was hallucinating, you know. Then I turned, and second time, take it one day at a time and I'll help you. I boarded that plane and I felt a presence next to me. I walked into his office the day after I got back. Plans were on his desk. The funeral was on Saturday. On Sunday, I was voted as chairman, senior pastor. I never preached a day in my life. Women's meetings, yes. I had never raised money. I said, God, I've been here 35 years. That should be enough. We only came for one. And I said, well, God, if you help me, I'll stay.
इसको हमेशा याद रखें।
And you are able
और तू कर सकता है।
to do far more.
और जो उससे अधिक कर सकता है।
Because impossible
और क्योंकि असंभव
is one of God's favorite words. I had to turn over a new leaf and go on from there. I would come home to the U.S. every time Bonnie would have a baby. I would stay with them when I was home. Happy birthday to you! Come see.
Right in there. There you go.
But I'd be out every weekend holding a service in a church, speaking on behalf of Calcutta. I love the development of the schools. I love the development of the hospital. I love the development of the churches. And of course, now the transition into complete national leadership, because the church has been taken to a new level. Absolutely a new level.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Grandma, let me help you. Let me go first real quick, and I'll help you out.
I have been a lot of places. I have seen a lot of faces. There are times when I felt all alone. But in those lonely hours, yes, those very lonely hours, God showed me that I was His own. Through it all, I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, I've learned to depend upon His word. I've learned to depend upon His word.